The sky above the planet Valora looked unlike anything a human had ever seen. It shimmered with soft blue clouds and gentle silver light that never fully disappeared, even at night. When the human ship Odyssey 1 entered its orbit, everyone on board felt as if they had stepped into a dream. For Captain Ethan Cole, this moment was more than a dream. It was history being written in front of his eyes. Humanity had finally made peaceful contact with an intelligent alien civilization. On the ground, tall crystal towers stretched into the clouds, surrounded by lush gardens that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The people of Valora were taller, stronger, and more graceful than humans. They moved with calm pride, their eyes shining with quiet wisdom. And above them all ruled Queen Arisen, the great leader known for her strength, discipline, and unmatched presence. Standing over 8 feet tall, she looked like a figure carved from the very light of her world. Her voice could silence a crowd, and her gaze could make even the bravest soldier hesitate. When she first heard that humans had arrived, she was amused. To her, humans were fragile creatures who still struggled with their own world. She found their curiosity charming, but their eagerness to form bonds with other species almost childlike. "They seek friendship as if the universe owes them kindness," she had said with a soft, knowing smile. Her advisors laughed with her, agreeing that these small visitors would soon learn how vast and ancient Valora truly was. When the day came for her to meet the human captain, the royal courtyard was filled with her people. Ethan Cole walked through the grand gates with calm steps. His uniform was plain compared to the shining robes of the Valorians, yet he carried himself with quiet confidence. Though much shorter than everyone around him, there was something in his eyes, a calm strength that refused to bend. He bowed respectfully before the Queen, his voice steady as he said, "It's an honor to meet you, Your Majesty." "Humanity comes in peace." The Queen looked down at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, with a light laugh that echoed softly through the courtyard, she replied, "Peace, you say? And what would you do with peace, little traveler?" Her tone was not cruel but distant, as if she was speaking to a child who did not yet understand the world. Ethan met her gaze without fear. "We wish to learn," he said simply, "and we wish to share." Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. He did not tremble or avert his eyes. That alone caught her attention. Humans, she thought, were strange creatures, small in size yet vast in emotion. Still, she could not imagine them standing equal with her kind. When the meeting ended, she turned to her council and said with a quiet smirk, "The human speaks of peace as if words can shape worlds. Let us see how long his courage lasts." In the days that followed, Ethan and his team worked under the watchful eyes of the Valorian guards. They were given quarters in a tall, glass-like structure near the royal gardens. Every morning, Ethan attended brief meetings with the Queen's advisors, where he discussed trade, culture, and shared knowledge. The Queen herself would sometimes observe from her high throne, silent but always watching. She noticed how Ethan listened carefully before he spoke, how he showed patience even when her people dismissed his ideas. One afternoon, as the humans demonstrated a small piece of Earth technology, a simple water purifier, the Queen arrived unexpectedly. Her presence silenced the room. Everyone bowed as she entered. Ethan stepped forward and offered a calm greeting. "We use this to clean our water on Earth," he explained. "It's a small step, but it helps us care for our people." The Queen studied the device, her tall figure casting a long shadow over him. "Such effort for something so basic," she said softly. "On Valora, our rivers clean themselves." Ethan smiled. "Then your world is wiser than ours," he replied. For a moment her expression softened, almost as if his words touched something deep within her. But she quickly turned away, hiding her curiosity behind her regal calm. Despite her distance, Queen Arisen began to notice the small things about him. He never spoke loudly. He never acted as if he were above anyone. When others mocked his simplicity, he simply smiled and continued his work. The Queen found herself observing him from afar more often than she intended. He reminded her of a stream, quiet, persistent, carving its way through the hardest stone. One evening, as the twin moons of Valora rose, a sudden storm swept across the city. The winds howled through the towers, lightning flashing like silver fire. The Queen, standing on her balcony, watched as her people hurried to secure the gardens. Down below, she noticed Ethan running into the courtyard, where a young Valorian child was trapped beneath a fallen branch. Without hesitation, he lifted the branch with all his strength and pulled the child to safety. When the queen later saw him return the child to her mother, his clothes soaked and torn, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. Her advisors called his act reckless, but she disagreed. "Reckless?" she said quietly. "No, it was brave." That night, for the first time, she found herself thinking about the human captain long after he had gone to rest. Over the next few days, she began to speak with him more directly. Their conversations were still formal, but less guarded. She asked him about Earth, about its oceans, its people, and the stars humans long to reach. Ethan spoke honestly, his eyes reflecting both pride and sadness. "We have many flaws," he admitted, "but we keep trying to be better." The queen listened in silence, feeling an unfamiliar respect for this fragile being who carried such determination. Perhaps, she thought, there was more to humans than she had believed. Yet she still laughed at the idea of any deeper bond. In her heart, she told herself, he is brave, but he is human. Our worlds are too different. Still, when she closed her eyes that night, she remembered his calm voice under the storm, the way he shielded the child, and the look of quiet peace in his eyes. For reasons she could not understand, the great queen of Velora, who once laughed at humans, found her thoughts drifting back to the small man who spoke of peace with the strength of 1,000 warriors, and so began a connection neither of them could yet see. A story that would soon challenge every boundary between their worlds. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the humans and the Valorians began to grow stronger. The once distant air of the royal city now felt slightly warmer toward the visitors from Earth. Captain Ethan Cole continued to lead his team with calm determination, earning respect through patience and understanding. He never demanded, never argued, he simply listened, observed, and learned. And slowly, even the proud Valorians began to see something different in him. Queen Arison, however, remained cautious. She watched him from afar, studying every move. The human captain was unlike anyone she had met. He did not try to impress her with power or wealth. He treated every person he met, royal or commoner, with equal kindness. That small detail confused her. On her world, strength and position meant everything. On his, it seemed humanity measured greatness by something else, something she could not quite define. One morning, as the sun cast golden light over the white towers of Velora, Ethan was invited to join the queen for a cultural exchange in the palace gardens. The invitation came as a surprise, for Arison rarely allowed outsiders to step into her private space. When he arrived, the gardens were filled with enormous flowers that changed color with the wind. The scent in the air was sweet like spring rain. The queen stood near the fountain, her tall figure glowing softly under the sunlight. When Ethan approached, he bowed with quiet respect. She nodded slightly, her voice calm and regal. "Captain Cole," she said, "your people are curious creatures. You study everything, even the smallest stone. Tell me, what do you seek to find in all this learning?" Ethan smiled gently. "Understanding," he replied. "The universe is too big to explore with fear. We believe that knowing others helps us know ourselves." For a moment, the queen was silent. His words carried a weight she had not expected. Then, with a soft laugh, she said, "And what have you learned of us, Captain? What do you see when you look at my people?" He looked around at the beautiful gardens, the towers in the distance, and then back at her. "I see strength," he said softly, "and a longing for something beyond power. You protect your people with pride, but there's also gentleness here, like the wind that moves your flowers." Arison tilted her head slightly, surprised by his observation. Few had ever spoken to her that way, neither in flattery nor fear, but with quiet truth. She found herself curious to hear more. "And what do you think of me?" she asked, her voice calm yet edged with curiosity. Ethan paused, thoughtful. "You lead with strength," he said, "but I think you also carry a great weight, the kind only a true leader understands." The queen looked at him for a long moment, her golden eyes unreadable. No one had ever spoken to her so honestly, especially not a human. That day, their conversation stretched longer than either expected. They spoke of their worlds, their dreams, and the loneliness that came with duty. When Ethan finally left the garden, the queen stood watching him go, wondering why the silence he left behind felt so strange. As the weeks continued, their paths crossed often. The queen began inviting him to council gatherings and discussions. At first her advisors were surprised, even uneasy, but she ignored their whispers. She claimed it was diplomacy, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. One afternoon, during a visit to a nearby Valorian village, Ethan noticed several citizens struggling to rebuild a bridge damaged by recent storms. Without waiting for help, he joined them, rolling up his sleeves and working alongside them. The villagers were astonished to see a royal guest doing manual work, and when the queen heard of it later, she could hardly believe it. "He repaired a bridge?" she asked her guards. "Yes, your majesty," one replied. "With his own hands." Arison dismissed her attendants and walked out to the balcony, looking down at the silver river that flowed through her city. She imagined the human captain covered in dust, working silently beside her people without any expectation of reward. That image stayed with her for hours. The next day she summoned him again, this time to the Hall of Knowledge, a place filled with ancient records and glowing scrolls. As they walked among the tall shelves, she asked, "Why do you do these things, Captain? You are an ambassador, not a laborer." He smiled softly. "Because leadership, your majesty, is not about standing above others, it's about standing with them." His words struck something deep in her heart. She said nothing for a moment, only watched him as he admired one of her world's ancient carvings. He treated their culture not as something foreign, but as something precious. For the first time, the queen felt something unexpected, a quiet respect that bordered on admiration. Later that evening, as the two shared tea in the palace courtyard, a sudden breeze carried soft petals across the air. Arison looked at the man sitting across from her, so small compared to her, yet filled with a strength she could not define. "Do your people believe in destiny, Captain Cole?" she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "We believe that we make our own destiny, one choice at a time." She looked down at her hands, thoughtful. "Then tell me," she said softly, "what choice brought you here?" He looked into her eyes with quiet sincerity. Maybe the universe wanted us to learn something from each other. The queen felt her heart tighten. She quickly looked away, pretending to admire the stars. For the first time in her long reign, she did not know what to say. As night fell, they continued talking until the moons rose high above them. Their words no longer sounded like those of two leaders, but like two souls discovering something familiar in the other. There was laughter, gentle silence, and a sense of peace neither had felt in years. When Ethan finally left the courtyard, the queen remained alone for a long time. She looked up at the sky, her reflection shimmering in the fountain water. "A human," she whispered to herself, as if testing the word. How strange that one so small could move the heart of a queen. From that day on, she began to see him differently. His steps echoed softly in her thoughts. His words lingered in her mind, and his calm presence began to fill the quiet spaces of her world. Still, she laughed quietly to herself whenever her mind wandered too far. "A bond between us?" she murmured. Impossible, but deep within her, a gentle feeling had begun to bloom, small, fragile, yet impossible to ignore. And as the stars of Valora shimmered above her, Queen Arison wondered if perhaps the universe was already writing a story she had never intended to begin. Time passed softly on Valora. The days were filled with golden light, and the nights glowed with two calm moons that seemed to watch over everything. The bond between Captain Ethan Cole and Queen Arison grew deeper, though neither spoke openly about it. What began as curiosity had turned into understanding, and what began as formality had become quiet friendship. Every morning, the queen met Ethan in the palace gardens, where the wind carried the songs of distant birds. They would walk side by side, talking about life on Earth and life on Valora. Ethan would describe oceans that stretched farther than the eye could see, mountains capped with snow and cities full of laughter and mistakes. Arison listened closely, sometimes with wonder, sometimes with amusement. To her, humans seemed reckless and emotional, but also alive in a way her people had long forgotten. "You humans are strange," she once said with a soft smile. "You fight, you fall, yet you always rise again. It is as if pain only makes you stronger." Ethan smiled. "Maybe it's because we know how fragile we are. When you know life is short, you value every sunrise." Arison looked at him, thoughtful. "We live for centuries. Maybe that's why we forget how precious time is." The queen found herself thinking about his words long after he left that day. Her people had everything, knowledge, power, and peace, but perhaps they had lost something simple and human. the feeling of wonder in every small thing. Ethan reminded her of that. His laughter, his curiosity, and the kindness in his voice began to fill the quiet halls of her heart. As the days grew warmer, their bond deepened. Sometimes when she spoke in council, she would find herself repeating ideas Ethan had shared. His way of thinking, simple yet wise, started to influence her decisions. The Queen's advisors noticed the change. They whispered among themselves, uneasy with how often the human's name passed her lips. One evening, after a long day of meetings, her closest advisor, Liren, spoke gently. "My queen, forgive me, but some among us are beginning to question your closeness with the human." Arison looked at him calmly. "Do they fear he will harm me?" "No," Liren said softly. "They fear he will change you." The queen said nothing for a long moment. Then she looked out at the city, glowing softly beneath the moons. "Perhaps change is not something to fear," she said. The next morning, Ethan was invited to join a festival in the capital. It was a celebration of harmony between species, a tradition that had never before included outsiders. When he arrived, the people looked at him with curiosity but not with anger. The queen introduced him to the crowd, her voice calm and proud. "This man has shown us that peace is not built with power, but with understanding." The crowd bowed, and Ethan felt something stir in his heart, a mix of gratitude and awe. For the first time, he truly felt accepted. When the music began, he stood beside the queen, watching her smile softly as the dancers moved like light across the marble floor. Later, when the festival ended, they walked alone through the quiet streets. The lamps along the path flickered gently, and a soft mist rose from the river. "I never thought I would stand among your people like this," Ethan said quietly. "And I never thought I would call a human my friend," Arison replied with a small smile. They stopped near the edge of a reflecting pool where the stars shimmered on the surface. The silence between them was warm, not awkward. The queen looked at their reflections side by side, one tall and luminous, the other small and human. "We are different in every way," she said softly. "Maybe that's why we understand each other," Ethan replied. We both stand between worlds. For a moment, their eyes met. No words were needed. The still air seemed to hold the unspoken feelings that both were afraid to name. Then Arison looked away, her expression unreadable. "You're a strange man, Captain Cole," she said quietly. "You make me see my world differently." He smiled gently. "And you make me believe there's more to the universe than I ever imagined." But peace never stays unchallenged for long. In the following weeks, tension began to grow among the Queen's council. Some feared that the Queen's bond with a human would weaken her rule. Others thought it would threaten their traditions. Rumors began to spread through the city, soft whispers that grew louder with each passing day. One evening during a council meeting, a noble stood and said sharply, "Your Majesty, our ancestors would not approve of this closeness with outsiders. The human sees us as equals, but we are not the same. It is not natural." The Queen's golden eyes turned toward him, calm but powerful. "Perhaps what is natural," she said slowly, "is not always what is right." Her voice filled the hall and silence fell. "For too long we have believed ourselves superior. Yet this human has shown us humility and kindness, things we claim to value but often forget." Ethan, standing quietly at the side, felt his heart tighten. He had not meant to cause trouble, yet his presence had changed more than he realized. After the meeting, he approached the Queen privately. "If my being here causes unrest," he said, "I can leave early. Peace means more to me than my pride." The Queen looked at him, her eyes soft. "You would leave for their comfort?" He nodded. "If it protects what we've built here, yes." She studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "And that is why you must stay. You remind us of what true peace looks like." That night, the Queen could not sleep. She stood on her balcony, the wind playing gently with her long silver hair. Her mind was full of thoughts about her people, her duty, and the human who had changed the rhythm of her heart. She remembered the sound of his voice, the calm in his eyes, and the way he never asked for anything in return. She laughed softly to herself, shaking her head. "The great Queen of Velora thinking of a human," she whispered. "What a strange thing the universe has done." But deep inside, her laughter was only a veil for something she was afraid to name, a feeling that was growing stronger with every sunrise. Ethan, too, lay awake that night in his quarters, staring at the faint light shining through his window. He thought about the queen, her grace, her strength, and the loneliness he sometimes saw hidden in her gaze. He had never met anyone like her. He knew that whatever bond they shared was rare, fragile, and real. Neither of them knew where this path would lead, but both understood that something extraordinary was happening, something that defied reason, yet felt as natural as breathing. And though the queen still told herself that such a connection was impossible, her heart had already begun to whisper a truth her mind refused to believe. It was the beginning of a love that would soon shake two worlds and change the destiny of both forever. The day of departure drew closer. The human team had completed their mission, and their time on Velora was nearly over. The queen had known this day would come, yet her heart felt heavier with every sunrise. The bond she had formed with Captain Ethan Cole had changed her in ways she could not explain. She had learned to see through human eyes, to feel warmth, hope, and courage in the smallest of things. But now, with his return to Earth approaching, her palace felt emptier, even before he had gone. Ethan, too, carried a quiet sadness in his heart. He had seen wonders beyond imagination, but none compared to the connection he had found with the Queen. There was something in her that went beyond power and beauty. Beneath her regal calm, he had discovered kindness, curiosity, and a quiet loneliness she never showed anyone else. He knew he would have to leave soon, yet he didn't know how to say goodbye. The final week was filled with official ceremonies. The Queen hosted grand banquets attended by nobles, scholars, and council members. Every time Ethan entered the hall, her eyes found him, though she tried to keep her composure. They spoke little in public, but in the silence between speeches and toasts, unspoken feelings seemed to fill the space. One evening, as the stars began to rise, the Queen summoned Ethan to the palace balcony, the same place they had spoken countless times before. The night air was cool, carrying the soft sound of waves crashing in the distance. Ethan approached quietly, bowing respectfully. "You leave tomorrow," she said, her voice calm but heavy. He nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "The ship departs at first light." The Queen looked out at the glowing horizon. "It is strange," she said softly. "How quickly time moves when something feels right." Ethan looked at her, unsure how to answer. "I never thought I'd find peace on another world," he said. "But here with you I found more than that. I found understanding." She turned to face him. Her golden eyes reflected the stars, and for a moment, she didn't look like a queen. Just someone standing between duty and emotion. "When I first met you," she said quietly, "I laughed at the thought of any connection between us. I thought humans were too fragile, too small to stand beside my people. But now I wonder if strength has many forms." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe it does. Sometimes strength is just having the courage to care." There was a long silence. The wind moved gently through her hair, and the light from the moons painted silver lines across her face. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "If the universe were different, if our worlds were one, perhaps things might be simpler." Ethan's heart tightened. "Maybe," he said softly. "But even if we come from different stars, I'll always be grateful for the time we shared." For the first time, the Queen reached out her hand. It was a small gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything unspoken. Ethan hesitated only for a moment before taking it. Her hand was warm, strong, and trembling ever so slightly. They stood like that for a long time, two beings from distant worlds connected by something that needed no words. When she finally withdrew her hand, she looked down at the silver pendant that hung around his neck, a small earth symbol he always wore. "You humans carry your memories in objects," she said. "They help you remember what you've lost." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes a memory is all we have." She thought for a moment, then turned to a small table beside her. Lying there was a smooth, crystal-like stone that shimmered with faint blue light. She lifted it carefully and placed it in his hand. "This stone carries our energy," she said. "When you look at it, you will see our sky. Let it remind you of Velora and of me." Ethan's voice was quiet, filled with emotion. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She gave a small smile. "Arison," she corrected softly. "Tonight, call me Arison." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the ocean below and the soft hum of distant lights filled the silence. Then the Queen said, "You should rest. Tomorrow will come too quickly." But Ethan didn't move. He looked at her one last time and said, "I'll never forget this place. Or you." Then, with quiet dignity, he bowed and walked away. The Queen remained alone on the balcony long after he was gone. She looked up at the stars, her hand still warm from his touch. "Farewell, Captain," she whispered. "May your sky be kind to you." When the morning came, the palace was filled with light. The human ship stood ready at the edge of the great field. The Queen arrived to see them off, surrounded by her guards and council members. Ethan stood at the base of the ship, his uniform crisp, his expression steady. But his eyes spoke of everything his words could not. Before he boarded, he turned to her. For a brief second, it was as if the entire world fell silent. The Queen gave him a small nod, dignified yet sorrowful. "Go in peace, Ethan Cole," she said. "And may your journey home carry the hope you brought here." He smiled softly. "Until we meet again, Your Majesty." The engines began to hum, the air trembling with energy. As the ship rose into the sky, the Queen watched in silence. The people around her cheered the success of the mission, but she heard none of it. Her eyes followed the ship until it became only a bright point of light in the distance. That night she returned to her chambers. The halls felt emptier than before, and the silence seemed heavier. She tried to focus on her duties, but her thoughts drifted endlessly to him. His words, his quiet courage, his laughter, they all lingered in her heart like echoes she could not silence. Days passed, then weeks. The Queen resumed her responsibilities, but something within her had changed. The world around her felt different, brighter, yet lonelier. Sometimes she would walk through the gardens alone where they had once talked, and imagine hearing his footsteps behind her. Then one morning she awoke feeling strange. Her senses felt sharper, her energy different. Her royal healers were summoned, and after careful examination, they looked at her with disbelief. The eldest healer bowed deeply and said, "Your Majesty, this is beyond anything we have known. You are carrying new life." The Queen stood silent, her eyes wide. For a long moment she could not speak. "That is impossible," she whispered. But deep within her she already knew the truth. She placed her hand gently on her chest, feeling the faint rhythm of new energy within her. A tear formed in her eye, not of sorrow but of wonder. "The human," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It seems the universe had other plans." That night she stood once more on her balcony looking at the stars. Somewhere among them, she knew Ethan Cole was looking at the same sky. And though countless miles separated them, she felt closer to him than ever before. The Queen, who had once laughed at the idea of pairing with a human, now carried the living proof that two worlds could truly become one. Weeks passed after Ethan's ship disappeared into the silver skies of Valora, leaving Queen Arison standing alone on the balcony of her grand palace. The cool air brushed past her face, carrying with it the faint scent of the earth pendant that now hung around her neck. Every time she touched it, memories of the human who had changed her heart returned. His calm voice, his honest eyes, and his strange yet beautiful way of seeing the world. She had once laughed at the thought of ever caring for a human, but now that laughter seemed far away, almost like a memory from another lifetime. The palace that had once felt like a place of pride and power now felt empty. Arison moved through its long halls quietly, her thoughts always drifting toward Ethan. Her people noticed the change in her. She spoke more gently, smiled more often, and no longer carried the heavy tone of authority that once defined her. Some admired this softer side, while others whispered in worry. To them, their queen's growing compassion seemed like weakness. They didn't understand that strength had taken on a new meaning for her. One evening, while standing in the royal gardens under the two glowing moons, Arison felt something unusual. A warmth spread through her body, followed by a pulse of energy unlike anything she had known. Concerned, she called for her healers. After several days of careful observation, they delivered news that left the entire court silent. Queen Arison was expecting. The idea was beyond belief. No union had occurred, yet her energy had merged with that of the human, creating something new, something alive. The news spread across Valora like wildfire. The elders were divided. Some called it a miracle, a sign of destiny between two worlds. Others called it unnatural, fearing that this child would bring imbalance. But Arison's heart was calm. She didn't see fear or confusion, she saw hope. For her, this child symbolized unity, not division. It was proof that life could bloom even between two different worlds, two different hearts. As the days went by, Arison often walked to the same balcony where she had last seen Ethan. She would place her hand over her heart, feeling the faint rhythm of new life within her. You will be loved, she whispered softly. You will remind both worlds that understanding is stronger than fear. The stars above seemed to listen as if the universe itself approved. On Earth, Ethan had resumed his duties, but his heart was not the same. He often found himself looking toward the night sky, tracing the faint shimmer that marked Velora's position. Every time he saw it, he felt a strange pull, a sense that something or someone was calling him. When a message finally arrived from the Valorian envoy, his hands trembled as he opened it. The message was brief, written in Arison's own elegant style. It read, "The bond between our worlds has given life. You are part of something eternal." Ethan sat silently for a long time, his heart pounding with emotion. He couldn't fully understand how it had happened, but he didn't need to. Deep inside, he knew that his connection with Arison had gone beyond words, beyond distance, beyond reason. It was something the stars themselves had written. He made a silent promise to return one day, not as an ambassador, but as someone who had left a part of his soul on another world. Meanwhile, on Velora, the queen prepared for what was to come. Her people gathered outside the palace, watching her more closely than ever. Some came to support her, believing that her child would bring a new era of peace. Others came in fear, unsure of what this event meant for their kind. But Arison stood tall before them, her voice calm yet powerful. "My people," she said, "for generations we believed that difference was something to fear. We laughed at what we did not understand. But now I know that understanding begins with respect and love. This child will not divide us. This child will unite us, for it carries both our strength and the heart of another world." Her words echoed across the great courtyard. Many fell silent, moved by the sincerity in her voice. Some even bowed their heads, realizing that their queen's journey had taught them more about wisdom than centuries of tradition ever had. Months later, as the first light of dawn touched Valora's horizon, Arison stood by her window holding the pendant Ethan had given her. Its silver surface caught the sunlight, shining softly. She smiled, her heart full of peace. She knew Ethan would one day return, and even if he didn't, his presence lived on in every heartbeat of the life she now carried. Far across space, Ethan looked up at the same sunrise from Earth's edge. The light reminded him of her, tall, strong, yet gentle. He felt certain that somewhere under a different sky she was thinking of him too. Time passed, and stories of the child of two worlds became legend across both planets. It was said that this child would grow up to bring harmony where none existed before, bridging not only species but hearts. Arison continued to lead her people with wisdom shaped by love, and though Ethan remained far away, their bond never faded. Years later, when Valora's twin moons rose one quiet night, Arison looked up once more, her eyes shining softly. "You once made me laugh at the thought of love," she whispered into the wind. "But now I know, it was love that made me truly live." And so, the queen who had once stood alone among the stars became a symbol of hope and unity for all who heard her story. Her laughter had turned into a promise that even across galaxies hearts could find each other, and that true connection would always be stronger than distance, pride, or fear. The legend of Queen Arison and the human ambassador lived on through generations, told in songs and stories across two worlds. It was not just a tale of love. It was a story of courage, understanding, and the quiet power of a heart that dared to believe that even the impossible could become real. And whenever the stars shone brightest, the people of both Earth and Valora would look up and remember the 8-foot alien queen who once laughed at the thought of pairing with a human, until she discovered that destiny sometimes begins with a single laugh and ends with a bond that lasts forever.